Hello and welcome to another Spirit of Nature art video tutorial. Today we're looking at making an altered book with a difference, taking this kiddie's cardboard book and turning it into something a lot more beautiful. I hope you will agree. This came from the charity shop. It was 30p and as you can see it's very bright and colourful. So the first job we need to do is get rid of some of that bright colour so that it's not going to interfere with what we want to put on top. And as you can see from the off, this is going to take quite a few coatings. So I think in the end I used 3 coats of gesso, and then on the front cover I put 2 additional coatings of just a normal white acrylic because I wanted that front cover to be able to take alcohol inks. So I'm choosing here 3 colours of alcohol ink and an alloy. I'll put the details below, and I've also got my little bottle of isopropyl alcohol to be able to help me move that around. Top tip, always if you're using alcohol inks, have the window open because otherwise it's very smelly and you'll get quite lightheaded. So you can see here I've put a couple of drops of the Amythest, I think is the colour, and also some of the alloy, and I just take my little hand blowing tool here and I'm gently moving that around. Now I chose the acrylic paint to give me a smoother surface to allow me to create that movement. Normally when you're using alcohol inks you use a special kind of plasticized kind of paper, so like a thin plastic, so that the alcohol inks can move a lot more freely. Acrylic gives us a way of being able to do that. It's not as good, but you can still get a pretty good effect, as I think you'll see. So each time I add ink to the page, I'm adding more of the isopropyl alcohol. That should be 91% or more to be able to activate the alcohol inks. And I'm just fiddling around, moving things around. If I don't like an area, I pop like that bit there, I pop a little bit more of the isopropyl on and then move it around. So this is a process you can take as long over as you like. The downside of using the acrylic paint is that where you move the inks, you'll notice I'm moving the inks out and then sometimes moving them back in. If you use special alcohol ink paper, generally, as you move the ink around, if you move the ink away from that area, it'll leave you a nice, clean, crisp white surface again. Whereas with the acrylic paints, you don't get that. You can see there's a slight staining to the page, but that's not a problem if you don't want it to be. So where I would quite often, if I'm using alcohol inks, I would like to create a lot of white space. On this, I decided that was not going to be the case. This is my little plastic brush that came on the top of, I can't even remember what it was, some kind of pencil now. I'm just putting a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on my craft mat there, dipping that plastic kind of brush in and just flicking it on the page, because everywhere that alcohol connects with the alcohol inks is going to react. So it's just going to create this lovely kind of galaxy effect. So that's what I was doing with that funny little, I have no idea what that is, but any kind of plastic brush is going to give you a similar kind of effect. And I'm just layering. I'm just continuing to add more ink and more alcohol to move it around until I get the depth of colour that I like. So I probably did this in 3 different settings, waiting for it to dry in between and seeing what it looked like, and then going back in and adding more where I felt it needed to. So you can see here after a couple more layers, it looks a lot more vibrant and vivid. And I'm just going to add a few more of those lovely splatters over the top where they've disappeared from the layering that I've done. So now it's time to add my focal image, and I've got this beautiful butterfly stamp that I decided to put on the front. So I'm using a permanent ink. I think this is Versafine because it really does bring out the detail, and making sure I've got plenty of ink on there because there's a lot of detail, but also what I want to do is emboss it. So you can see here I'm adding a clear embossing powder so that it's going to pick up that blank ink below. So I'm just tapping off all the excess and popping that back in the pot. And just seeing here, you can tell that there was perhaps a little bit of moisture still in that alcohol ink. So a lot of that embossing powder just kind of lightly stuck to the surface. So I'm just going in with my paintbrush and just getting rid of any of that extra embossing powder that is around the butterfly so that we can get a really nice crisp edge. Probably if I'd left it longer and been more patient, then I wouldn't have had to do this. But it was touch dry. I thought I could get away with it, but it was easy enough to rectify. You can see how much of that powder is coming off actually. Because I use clear embossing powder, it doesn't matter too much because when I heat it, anything that's behind it is going to stay the colour that it is already. So where the black ink is, it will pick up blank, but anything that's left in between those black lines is just going to be clear anyway. So it's really not going to impact the overall effect. So going in with my embossing gun here and just heating it to melt it, you can start to see how it turns that lovely, shiny, slightly raised black colour as that embossing powder melts. And one of a kind. I kind of thought that that was very appropriate because this book truly is one of a kind. And now I wanted to do the back cover. And I had this lovely card that had been sent to me for my birthday, and I thought it was so beautiful that I wanted to be able to include it in a project, and this seemed like the perfect one. So I am just using a matte medium gel just to stick that in place on the back there, and then trimming that down so that it fits that space perfectly. Just weighing it down as well, just to make sure it sticks first. One of the benefits of using a book like this is it enables me to really play. Often if I'm doing an altered book, I feel a real responsibility because I'm working with something that has history, that's old, that has got some kind of story behind it. But these kind of books, 30p from a charity shop, do you know what? If I play around with it and it's not great, it's not the way I want it to be, no biggie. So I want to cover up the spine. I didn't want my artwork to go into that spine because I wanted to give it a little bit more support. So I'm just choosing some washi tape. I'm just going through my box of washi tapes and pulling out some ones that I feel either match or contrast in a nice way to pull those together. And although washi tape is sticky, I want this to make sure it really sticks down. It's going to be on the spine, so it's going to get a fair bit of usage every time it's open and closed. So I'm using my matte medium gel again, just to stick that down underneath and then going over the top of it again, just to make absolutely sure that that is going to hold up to the job of keeping that spine nice and safe and secure. And then just starting to edge that front page there, just to give it a bit of a frame and make it feel like that belongs on that page. A little bit of ink around the edge does wonders. So now it's time to prep the pages inside. And I decided I didn't want to go through all that gessoing again. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do some collage. I got these old book pages, some music, some words, just got a right mix of them and tore them up into different sizes and shapes and just started to collage them down. Again, I used my Liquitex matte medium gel and made sure that I put plenty on so that we can avoid any bubbles underneath as it dries. And not really bothering too much about what goes where, because this is going to get covered up. What I'm really looking for in making this collage is some texture. So texture not just from the printing of the notes and the words, but also these different shapes, the torn edges, will create some texture for when I come to colour these pages as well. And I love doing a bit of collage like this because there is no way of getting it wrong. You just put something on the page wherever it feels right, no overthinking. It's a great thing to do if you've got yourself a little bit stuck in your creative flow, just to do something and get something on the page. This is just a brilliant way to get started. And I don't trim the edges until it's dry. Once everything is dry, that's the best time to trim the edges without causing any damage. Now I want to do the next page, and I've decided to go with maps. Now you may have noticed I've got a bit of plastic there that I've put in the previous page. I just want to make sure that if there is any glue still hanging around, that when I close those two pages together, they're not going to get stuck. And I just use the inserts from cereal packets. So it's my way of recycling and making sure that I protect the pages of my journal whilst I'm working on it. So this is an old map book that somebody gave to me, and again, texture. Look at all that wonderful texture that comes from looking at that map. Again, just making sure any bubbles might come out with the glue. Now I want to go in now and not completely cover those backgrounds, but adding some gesso in to be able to knock that into the background enough that I can put my own artwork over the top without it drawing away from it. But also as well, that gesso gives a really nice base coat to be able to put any medium on top of. And again, we've got 2 more pages to cover, and as I didn't want to spend ages gessoing, I used some scrapbook paper that just came from, you get those little pads from the craft shop, and chose 2 different themes, blue for this spread and then the kind of pink and gold for the others. Again, this is going to get knocked back with gesso, so it's again about thinking about enough of a pattern coming through, or perhaps enough that's going to give me some inspiration to get started on what I want to put over the top, and perhaps a colour theme as well. But not getting too hung up with exactly what it's going to look like. Yeah, it doesn't quite fit the page, so I'm sticking some washi tape over the top and down the middle, but it's all going to get gessoed over. That will bring it all together, and that will all kind of fade nicely into the background once I start journaling on these pages. And as you'll see, coat of gesso going on over the top just to knock that into the background. As gesso dries, it gets more transparent, so always wait until it's dry before you add another layer. And now the final spread. So these beautiful kind of pinky purpley with a little bit of gold sparkle in. I thought that would be a nice way to finish off the journal. Same as before, using the matte medium to stick that down, putting some washi tape in the middle that complements. I think I found one that was pink with a little bit of gold in as well. So here we are, our finished art journal covered, ready for us to get creative on the pages inside. So I hope you will follow me over the next few weeks as I start to create these spreads on the inside and see how we can turn this old kiddie's book for 30p into a really beautiful art journal.